not forgotten. His tone gets really stern. If someone is talking about spiritual/occult stuff as if they understand it completely, and have control over that realm, then they are talking out of their ass. People who really understand the paranormal are those who understand that it is in a realm way beyond that which we can understand. That doesn't make it less real, but claiming you can manipulate it is arrogant as all hell. A few days later, I've been getting interested in the lore all around the camp and want to try and map some of the trails that go to the end of the property with GPS. The camp is nearly a century old, and there were old campsites and foundations everywhere. Thought if it would be cool if I could map where they all were, as older, decommissioned trails and stuff were not marked on the official map. Do a few hikes around the loop to the north with the ruins in the daytime. Looking along the trail for possible old paths, campsites, etc. Get to the part of the loop with the ruins. By now I had been up there plenty in the daytime. Not every time had I gotten that unnerving instinct, but when I did I started to take it more and more seriously. First thing you notice about the ruins area is that the loop's trail bends and goes up a hill, and when you reach the crest of that hill the sound of birds fades. The part of the forest around the ruins is devoid of any noise, birds overhead, animals scurrying around, trees/leaves settling. Even in the daytime, there is a noticeable quiet about this region that is distinguishable from earlier parts of the trail. I end up finding a trail that had been covered up by some sticks. Yellow blazes on trees had been painted over by black paint. Looked like someone had recently decommissioned this trail. Have one of the guys with me stay on the main trail and keep visual contact as I explored what was over there. Hard to explain, but the woods up there feel like they shift sometimes in the daytime. Patches of ferns move around, trails move to different spots, etc. It was protocol every time we explored in this area that any time we deviated from the trail, someone stayed on the main loop so nobody gets lost. I follow the trail about 100 m. There's a clearing, looks like an old campsite, rocks and things not normally placed. Ring of rocks in the middle covered by leaves, looks like an old fire pit. I take pictures and then make my way back to the original trail. Find the possibility of having discovered an abandoned campsite really exciting. Talking about it with the staff. Go to consult Ted. He's also very familiar with the various ruins and abandoned stuff around camp. Ask him about it, show him the pictures, asks him what he thinks it is. Kinda avoids the questions. Tells me to keep it quiet. I don't understand what is going on, really just wanted to see if this was an old campsite. I approach Ted later in the day and ask him again. He pulls me away from the rest of the staff and I show him the pictures again. Starts explaining to me in a hushed voice. There are a whole lot of crazies up here. We've had incidents on the property here and found evidence of some rituals being performed around the property over the years. Look at him dumbfounded and not sure if he's actually serious. Yet, one time we were walking that northern loop and found a bunch of shells arranged like a pentagram. Other times there are candles placed on rocks in the middle of the woods. The crazies around here do some crazy shit. So could you try and keep this quiet from the rest of the staff? We don't want rumors to spread about this. I'm realizing he's being completely legit. Convince him to explore the area again with me. We get back up to the clearing with the rocks, right across the trail from the fire pit where we tell the stories with the campers. He starts uncovering the leaves on top of the circle of rocks. Facial expression changes. It's not arranged like a fire pit, not like a pentagram either, some other formation that was clearly unnatural and ritualistic. Points out a few rocks placed equidistant around the circle. That's where they would put the candles. This is real.jpg. Listen to me. We didn't find this. Nobody is going to hear about this, understood? I nod in shock. We destroy the rock formation and cover up the offshoot trail. Ted talks to the ranger, who lives on the property year-round, as well as some of the really senior staff. All I'm told is that they took care of it. Never talk about it again. That's all I'm going to post for now. I've had a few more experiences, but they're really long to explain, so I'll save them for later. Alright/x/, you probably won't believe me, as I'm not even sure myself if I believe it, but I'm going to tell you this. You guys are the only people who won't immediately dismiss my story as insane, but you don't have to stay here, so keep that in mind. I've written this all out in advance for both your and my own convenience. Take the time to post this as I write it. My family has a history of mental illness. This is what I'm going to start off with, as a bit of a disclaimer to you all. My uncle killed himself. My grandfather blew his own brains out. My mother is bipolar. My father's father was a rapist. The list goes on. So anyways, this all starts off about 2 months ago on the last day of the semester for college. Now I normally get a ride home as the walk is a bit long, but today my mother, she picks me up and I live with her. I know, couldn't use her car at the time due to repair issues, so I was stuck walking this time. The path I went on is a bit of a back way on a gravel road surrounded by trees. I decided to go this way because it was about the same distance and it was hot, so I figured the trees would provide me with some shade. So off I go on my merry walk in sandals, the rocks on the ground getting stuck in my toes and stabbing my feet. After what I estimate was about 15 minutes, I accidentally stepped into a muddy hole, and promptly yelled out a multitude of obscenities. So now I had to not only walk home, but walk home with my leg covered in mud. Continuing, I trudged on with drying mud on my foot only to, yet again, walk into another hole. After this point, things started to become familiar. Yes, you know where this is going. The trees were the same, the road was the same, and yet again I'd stepped into the same mud hole. Now as I frequently visit /x/ my first thought was that this was something paranormal. Although I admit I was disturbed. I trudged back down the path in the hopes that I'd find myself at the college again. To my dismay, I did not. Instead I had come across the same mud hole from the opposite direction. So at this point I was starting to panic. Many thoughts began racing through my head. Would I be stuck in this strange loop and die there? Was there something waiting for me in the trees? Am I going insane? I immediately ran down the path as fast as I could. I even left behind my bags and books and ran with every ounce of energy that I had. As expected, I ran past my own pile of junk several times before I decided to sit next to it and try to rationalize everything out. I stayed vigilant of my surroundings and made a point to look around me for anything at all that stood out. At this point I thought, what if I just go through the trees here, and I began thinking of this all as a game, looking for any loopholes or solutions out of this. So I walked through the seemingly endless stream of trees only to end up on the other side, staring at my books. I have severe anxiety and this entire situation was making me sick. I stopped and blew my entire lunch up before sitting down again. Finally, in my desperation, I tried to climb one of the trees. I made it a decent way up before promptly falling from it and landing on my back. It ached, but I was okay. So I laid there, feeling like I was going to die. I then fell asleep. After an unknown period of sleeping, I awoke to a man standing over me asking if I was okay. I looked around and then looked at him with a terrified look on my face. He asked me if I needed to go to the hospital, and all I said was no. Just take me home. Although he was admittedly concerned, he let me pack my stuff up in his truck and he drove down the path. Only this time, instead of ending up in a loop, we actually came out of the loop onto the next street, and he drove me home. I grabbed my stuff and walked into my house. I expected my mom to ask me why I'd been gone so long, but she simply said hello and continued on about her business. I looked at the clock in the living room and found that it had only been 30 minutes since I left the college. I was both exhausted and afraid. So I went into my room, locked the door and laid on my bed thinking about what had just happened. So I went to sleep and woke up the next day, the first day of summer for me. I was too afraid to tell anybody about what had happened, and decided to ignore it and hope that it had all been a very vivid hallucination. The next week or two went by fairly uneventful, and although that whole scenario was still in my mind, I was starting to think that the heat was just causing my mind to play tricks on me and that things were okay. LOL, too bad for me. I was either very wrong or my brain decided it was time to fuck me in the ass. Strange events began happening, not as over the top as the first event, but unsettling nonetheless. I saw extremely dark figures roaming the halls. Sometimes out of the corner of my eye, other times they walked right in front of me before disappearing, and every time nobody else in my house could see them. It began happening more and more frequently, and I even considered telling this story to you guys about a month ago, but I figured I'd be disregarded as a troll. As it went on, even stranger things began occurring. I began losing chunks of time. I'd finish lunch and less than a minute later I'd look out the windows to see darkness, and my mom would be preparing dinner. Then events began elongating. I went into my room one afternoon and laid there for a good couple of hours just staring at the ceiling before taking, and when I awoke I looked at the clock to find it'd been no more than 5 minutes. More recently, the most disturbing and unsettling of these events began happening. I had still told no one about what was going on, so I tried to act fine in front of my family. I was sitting down, eating dinner, and when I finished I walked down the hall